If there's one thing everyone with an interest in law and order agrees on, it's this. The best way to cut crime is to stop people who go to jail offending again when they come out. What they can't agree on is how to make it happen. Today, the Justice Secretary, Chris Grayling, will tell MPs about the latest plan. Every prisoner, no matter how long they've been inside, will be supervised for at least a year when they come out. At present, they don't get supervision unless they've been sentenced to more than a year. Will it work? Well, if it does, it will need the support of various charities, and I'm joined by the chief executive of one of them, RAP, the Rehabilitation for Addicted Prisoners Trust, Mike Trace, its chief executive, and also by the Justice Secretary himself, Chris Grayling. So, Mr. Trace, you approve of the thinking behind this. You're not so sure about the how it'll work in operation, in reality.
Good morning. Yes, we definitely welcome the determination to get to grips with reducing reoffending. Overall crime's coming down, but the reoffending rates of people already in the system isn't. So we need to be a lot more ambitious in trying to turn people away from the life of crime that they've engaged in. And we can be ambitious, it can work, but you've got to be very focused on efficient programs and programs that actually deliver the results.
And you're not convinced that this is it?
Well, the system is a new one. The Ministry of Justice is trying the idea of competition, the idea of focusing on results, trying to get new actors into the market to try and bring new ideas. And certainly, new ideas and flexibilities are very welcome.
But there's no more money. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? It isn't a question of the government going out there and buying in at more services, as it were.
No, that's right. And basically, as far as I understand the proposals, the government are asking the sector to do more with less, to supervise more offenders, be more creative with what we do with them, with presumably less money. That challenge is not unwelcome, though, because I do think the sector can step up and creative ideas can make a really big difference. RAPT, for example, our latest studies into us show that we produce a 65% reduction in reoffending with the guys we work with. Now, if we can replicate that on larger scale, then we can do great things.
Well, how do you do that? How do you replicate it on a larger scale, as you put it?
One of the proposals that we do welcome is the focus on trying to mobilise ex-offenders to be part of the solution, instead of part of the problem. So mobilising a lot of guys on a voluntary basis or getting them into work to be demonstrating and being role models to people who are still involved in crime. We think that's one example of where you can be much more effective, much more efficient.
Yeah, but I mean, there'll be plenty of ex-offenders who wouldn't be able to do that for all sorts of different reasons.
Oh, absolutely. It's there are only a certain type of offender who want to do that.
Exactly.
And second of all, have the skills and have the qualities to be able to turn their lives around and then become, as I say, positive role models. But if you can mobilise those guys who are up for doing that, and most of RAP's workforce is actually ex-offenders, ex-addicts, then if you can do that well, you can make big difference. We can be ambitious.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Chris Grayling, as you will know, probation officials are pretty sceptical about it, ill thought through, untried, untested, all that sort of thing. It seems a bit woolly, doesn't it?
Well, it isn't really. I mean, we've worked very hard on this for 6 months, and I appreciate that this is a difficult time for those in the probation service. They're asking me the question why. The simple answer is that we have a system at the moment where only around 25% of probation time, as identified by the Select Committee, is spent working with offenders. Something like 40% of the money we spend on probation is spent on support costs, and we have reoffending rates that are rising. And the biggest block of offenders who are likely to reoffend get no support at all post-prison. I mean, literally, if you go to jail for less than a year, you walk out onto the streets with £46 in your pocket and that's it. And 60% of those people reoffend. That cannot be a sensible system. It leads to more and more victims of crime, and it needs to change.
Yeah, but the way it needs to change, it has to change. Everybody you talk to says this anyway, don't they? And that is, they've got to have, above all, they've got to have somewhere to go. They've got to have a home to go to. Well, this isn't going to give them that.
Well, one of the things I expect to see happen, indeed it's already happening, is some of the organisations that will, I think, in the end come in and work with us on this are already forming partnerships with housing associations in recognition of the fact that this is the most important part of getting offenders or back onto the straight and narrow. Housing is crucial to that. And I think we'll see very close ties between organisations delivering supervision and support for offenders and those who are providing housing. It's about freeing freeing them up to be innovative.
Well, but it's hard to see. It's also about not spending any more money, and it's hard to see, as Mr. Trace just said. I mean, he is sympathetic to the scheme, but he says you're trying to do more with less money.
Well, that's right. And of course, we're doing that right across the public sector. But when only 25% of probation officers' time is spent working with offenders, then there's got to be room for efficiency in the system. And it's got to be possible to actually provide support to a big block of offenders who are getting none at the moment.
It rather sounds as if you want probation officers to have a much smaller role in the whole thing.
Well, the role of probation in the public sector will change. We will have a single national probation service. It will specialise particularly on the protection of the public from serious risk of harm. They will continue to look after the most serious offenders, the highest risk offenders, those who are looked after under multi-agency supervision at the moment. That's not going to change, and it's important that doesn't change, because I'm not contracting out the supervision of a dangerous rapist.
Nonetheless, the role is being reduced. That's clear.
Well, there will be a smaller public probation service.
Yeah.
Many of those who currently work within the probation service will move to work with different organisations. But yes, this is a conscious decision. I want to make the best use of the skills of the public sector, the private sector and the voluntary sector. The private sector can help me bring costs down so I can afford to pay to support the people who get no support at the moment.
You can't be sure of that, because you may end up with large corporations taking over the whole thing, as has happened in previous exercises like this, where you find the only people who can actually afford to do it are the big boys.
Well, there's nobody going to be taking over this who can't deliver value to money for me and can't deliver that support to the offenders who are getting none at the moment. But there's also really important skills in the voluntary sector, the kind of mentoring skills we've just been hearing about.
From ex-offenders?
Well, I mean, I personally think there is nobody better placed than the old lad gone straight to try and turn the young offender's life around.
It's a nice idea, this, isn't it? Getting rid of lots of probation officers and replacing them with old lags.
Well, this is not about sacking huge numbers of
No,
probation
but as you
officers,
said,
but
it is making the service smaller, and yeah.
It's about evolving over time to a situation where I think we will see far more former offenders providing mentoring support. And the crucial
Getting
difference...
paid for it?
Very often, yes. There will be jobs doing this. And I think the important thing is also...
Sorry, just to pursue that for a second, if I may. So diverting money from paid probation officers to, at the moment anyway, unpaid old lags, as you put it, and they may in the end end up being paid.
Well, if you look at RAPT, who have a good reputation at helping bring down offending, a large proportion of their staff are people who've been through the system already. There is nobody
You've been
better
to jail
placed.
already, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Been addicts, been to jail. These are people, if they've turned their lives around, can actually help those who have yet to do so turn their own lives around. And that's a really important part of the kind of mentoring support I want to see.
Still very hard to see how you can do it without any extra money.
Well, but that starts with the premise that you can only ever achieve improvement by spending more money. The fact is, every major organisation in the commercial sector has spent the last generation constantly looking for new ways to do things, to be more effective in delivering service to its customers, and at the same time bringing down cost.
Yeah,
there's no reason for the public sector to be any different.
Well, I'm just recalling slightly at the idea of them being customers. I suppose in one sense they are, but it's a slightly...
Well, for the commercial organisations it is. I mean, if you're a big commercial organisation, you're trying to improve the support you provide to your customers, the service you provide to your customers, and bring down costs.
But there will be many more people involved in this. That's the point, because if everybody who does a year, everybody who goes to jail, however long it is, even if it's less than a year, all of them will be involved in this. All of them will be given the promise that they will be supervised for a year. That's quite a big task.
Well, I mean, to give you a context, we're talking about at the moment around 250,000 people a year being supported through probation. This will bring another 50,000 or so into the net for the first time, and I'm going to pay for that by creating a system that is less bureaucratic and less expensive to run. And as I say, only 25% of the time currently spent by probation officers at work is spent working with offenders, and that should change.
Chris Grayling, thanks very much indeed, and Mike Trace as well.